In previous class, we learned that it is possible that to determine the sales quantity required for meeting up a certain fixed expenses, sales amount either in quantity or in dollar amount, it is possible, and we have learned about it. So in continuation of that learning, what we are interested to do in our learning objective 6 in today's class, that we like to see, that is it possible that I have target an amount of profit and I want to know that how much unit of my products need to be sold for getting that target profit. So that is the question which has been asked in the learning objective 6 you are watching on the slide. Okay, so we are interested to know the level of sales to achieve a desired level of profit. Okay, so before showing you that how we can proceed, we like to iterate you to recall that what we did when there was a fixed expense, and we are interested to know that how much unit of sales we need to cover, or we need to sell for covering this amount of fixed expenses. So we'll not be doing anything completely new. What we'll be doing, we'll be adding or we'll be adjusting our existing equation or replacing our formula for the purpose of getting the sales quantity or sales dollar to get desired target profit. But the procedure is mostly similar what we did in previous class. Okay, yeah, so this is the question. So we can solve the question using either equation method and the formula method. Okay, we like to achieve some the required level of sales quantity. Okay, so let's look at a problem. But before looking at problem, let's recall that what we learned in previous class. We learned that profit can be expressed in this way: the unit contribution margin multiplied by the quantity. It is the total contribution margin, and we know it very well that we like to see that whether this contribution margin is adequate to cover up the fixed expenses. When these are barely adequate, this contribution margin is barely adequate to cover the fixed expenses, in that case you would see the profit is 0, and that is our break-even point. Okay, but here our target profit is not 0. Our target profit is something positive number. Obviously, you do not expect that our target profit is a target loss. So we expect that this will be a positive number. So we will have this number. We have a target profit of this amount, some amount, and we want to solve it in the Q for that amount. So what can we do? The same case what we are with which we are dealing from the very beginning of this chapter, and the RBC, the bicycle company, their management wants to know that how many bikes we must sell to achieve a target profit of $100,000. Okay, so we like to use this equation here. So what I like to do, if we put $100,000 here, and we know how much was our contribution margin originally. You can you recall? I like to test your memory. Can you recall what was our contribution margin in the current case? 500 was selling price. Then I'm not giving you the other information. Yeah, good, 200. Because our variable expense was 300. So that our contribution margin is 200 per unit. Okay, remember it is contribution margin, it is not contribution margin ratio. We'll see the application of contribution margin later in the formula method. Okay, so what can we do? We like to solve for Q. So Q is unknown. So can you recall the fixed expenses? Was it 60,000, 100,000, or a number between these two? Yeah, good. 80,000. Okay, so if you solve the equation for Q, what you'll get Q equal to 900 units. If you solve the equation, what we wrote in previous slide, you would get the Q is equal to 900 units. What does it indicate? It indicates that I need to sell 900 units of bikes to have a profit of $100,000, given that the selling price, variable cost, fixed expenses are given or are maintained as before. Okay. So obviously there are some assumptions. Assumptions are like those. And if I change this number, obviously this number will be changed. Okay. If I say that the fixed expenses is not this amount, or fixed contribution margin is greater, in that case, you need to think of that what components have been changed. Okay. Yeah. Now the formula approach, you probably use the formula method for the determining the break-even quantity of sales. Now we are using the formula method for the purpose of getting the target profit. Okay. So you see that we need to cover at least 2 expenses now with our contribution margin. So which expenses we need to cover? First of all, fixed expenses. Solely it was in the break-even calculation. Okay. Now, in addition to fixed expenses, we like to achieve a certain amount of profit. So that is the target profit. Okay. So that's why the numerator has been updated, or numerator has been revised to add the total target profit to the fixed expenses. So you try to understand the base that it was fixed expenses. Why we are adding the target profit now? Because we like to cover target profit also in addition to fixed expenses from the contribution margin we are getting from each unit. Okay. So if our target profit is say 20,000, fixed expenses 80,000, our contribution margin is per unit is 200. Can you recall, can you estimate that how many unit of sales I need to achieve, I need to have to attain this target profit? Can you quickly estimate what is the number here? 100,000 multiplied by 2. Is it 900? It is 20,000, it is 80,000. So in total, I need to make up how much? 100,000. Is it? 100,000, yeah. So I need to achieve 100,000 amount, and by I'm getting $200 as a contribution margin from each unit. So in that case, my number will be 500 units of bike. Okay, so let's apply it for the given case here. The RBC management wants to have a profit of this amount. 100,000 is a big amount. In addition, you see that this is our target profit. And what can we do? We can add it the fixed expenses 80,000, and we can divide the numerator by 200, and we will get our unit sales is equal to 900 units. That's calculation what we used it in the previous slide. Okay. Now we like to see that we have solved the problem in terms of quantity. Quantity, I mean in terms of units. Now, in addition to units, we like to know that what is my what is the sales level required in terms of dollar, or in terms of taka, or in terms of monetary unit. How much dollar unit of sales I need to achieve for attaining the target profit. Okay, so let's see the case. You probably can recall that where we applied the contribution margin ratio. So you saw in previous class that when our concern is the sales dollar, we use the contribution margin ratio. When we are particularly interested only with the sales quantity, in that case, we use the contribution margin amount only. Okay. So you need to understand this, that in which case, which will be applicable or which will give us the shortest possible solution. Okay. So you see that our target profit is now 100,000 as before, and we use this equation in previous class. We just using this for the purpose of the target profit. In the break-even analysis, our target profit was 0, but here we are not in a break-even case. We are in a positive case. So we like to know that for achieving 100,000 profit, 100,000 profit, this is our target profit, this one. And our contribution margin, if you can recall that if our selling price is 500, variable expense is 300, and if I divide this per unit contribution margin 200 by our selling price, we would get this amount is 40%. Is it? Can you recall that from where this 40% has come? This 40%. Can you recall? Or is it something new? Okay. So write your response, and you see that it is already familiar with you that we know that how can we get the contribution margin. It is obviously in terms of unit per unit. You can also determine the contribution margin ratio. If I do not give you the per unit selling price, per unit variable cost, rather I give you the total sales, total variable cost in terms of dollar, you can also solve the contribution margin ratio. Okay. So you see, if we take the contribution margin ratio and multiply this by the sales amount, remember, I do not know. I do not know. I like to know the sales dollar. Okay, that's why it is unknown. And I know my fixed expense is 80,000. So what can we do? We can get the 40% 0.4 sales, and we can take it as 180,000 if we transfer this on the left side, and sales should be equal to 180,000 taka divided by 0.4 contribution margin. And you see that 180,000 comprises which amount? It comprises two amounts. One is the target profit 100,000, and the one is the fixed expenses of 80,000. So this is the approach we have solved using the equation method or the formula approach. This one, this approach, what we just have done, this is an look like an equation or formula. It's a kind of equation approach. Okay, we are just reapplying the equation, and now if we like to see the same thing from the formula approach, you can recall that you have to recall that how we apply the formula in case of determining the break-even sales. Okay, again, you can remember that it was only fixed expenses part. There was target profit was 0, in which case break-even case. That's why we didn't write anything. But you see now we do not have a target profit of 0. Rather, we have a target profit of some positive amount. Let's say that amount is 100,000. So we like to achieve this total amount from our contribution margin. Now, as we are using the formula approach, we need to divide, and we are wanting to get the dollar sales rather than the unit sales. So we have to apply the contribution margin ratio here rather than contribution margin. Okay. So we have to cover up in total 180,000. And what can we do? We can divide this number by 40% contribution margin ratio. and you will see that this is the dollar sales volume. Okay, so this amount indicates what? This amount indicates that for getting the $100,000 dollar profit, I need to have a sales amount, a sales dollar amount of $450,000. Okay, so let's have a quick check. I like to get your response in the chat box, and the quiz question is before you. Again, the coffee clutch is an espresso stand in a downtown office building. The average selling price of a cup of coffee is $1.49, and the average variable expense per cup is $0.36. The average fixed expense per month is 1,300. Use the formula method to determine how many cups of coffee would have to be sold to attain a target profit of 2,500 per month. You see the fixed expenses are given in per month, and the target profit is also given in per month. So they need to know that how many units of coffee they have to sell per month. Okay, so get this number. By this time, I like to ask you that whether you watched the video I shared with you, where I got the story I shared in previous class. You watched the video which I shared with you for giving you the idea about a makeshift tea stall in the EPZ. Okay, you found it interesting. Or you knew these ideas earlier? So by this time, we are talking about the real life cases. You solve the problem and write your answer in the chat box. Okay. Remember, it has been mentioned that you need to use the formula method. So I'm getting good responses. People are with me and are writing the answer. What about others? Okay. Yeah, the responses are coming. Okay. So I think I have got adequate responses to proceed. So let's check whether that we need to use the formula method for looking at for getting the quantity we sold for the purpose of target profit of 2,500. So we know in formula method, we need to add two things in the numerator, the target profit 2,500, and we need to cover also the fixed expenses, which is 1,300 here. And we have to divide this number by the contribution margin ratio. If I'm not wrong, it is probably 0.758. It was an answer in a quick check, which is difference between 1.49 and the 0.36 sales price minus variable expense divided by sales price 1.549. So I need to get this number, and that is the response to the question which has been asked here. How many cups of coffee they have to be sell to attain a target profit of 2,500 per month? Okay, so I see that I have yeah, what has been done here? Okay, so the question is in terms of how many cups of coffee? How many cups of coffee? Okay, so in that case, when it is how many cups of coffee, I cannot use the contribution margin ratio, rather I have to use the contribution margin per cup. Okay, so I did a mistake here. So contribution margin per cup is 0.36. Okay, so what I did was for getting the sales dollar. Yeah, so 3,800 over needs to be divided by 1.13. Yeah, you have responded it correctly. 3,333. Okay. Now the question is in terms of sales dollar. How much sales dollar I need to achieve? The same thing, you just need to use the thing what I have written first, what I wrote. I mean contribution margin ratio. Okay, so you see, if I write the contribution margin ratio, what I will get? I'll get the sales in terms of dollar. So in terms of sales dollar, this is 513. So $513 amount of sales they need to generate. Okay. So your task is to take some random numbers. Let's take, you can think of the case what we shared earlier in previous class of a case stall, and try to make some rough calculation that if the shop is at Karon Bazaar, and what amount of sales they need to generate for having this amount of target profit and for covering this amount of fixed expenses. So try to get this number. Okay, so this will help you to make a big decision later when you will be a manager in a corporate enterprise. Okay, so you have to start from very scratch. Okay, so think of some random numbers and mix up with people, talk to your nearby grocery store and talk to him and ask him that how much fixed expenses he incurs and what is his target profit he needs to achieve for covering his family expenses and for covering up his other family expenses, these things, personal expenses. It will reflect his target profit and savings also, and try to determine the contribution margin ratio if he is a seller of single product or multiple product. I will show you that how it is possible to apply this in case of multiple product, but think of a single product right now, and you can have an idea that how much unit of sales I need to achieve for target profit. Okay, so do not get hung up with all the exercises given in the text. Try to create your own exercise and try to solve the exercise created by you, and that learning will be more solid than the learning if we just solve the problems given in the text based on the enterprises or based on the shops which are operating in the Western countries where the book was written. Okay, yeah. Now our next learning objective is to look at the margin of safety. Have you heard about this term from your earlier courses in any way? I'd just like to get your response, yes, no. You have heard about the margin of safety concept. No. Okay. Let me wait for some of the responses so that I can understand that there is no one who has heard about the margin of safety in his or her previous courses. I see responses are coming. Sir, is it profit percentage? The answer is no. Yeah. So you are claiming that you have listened, you have not listened the margin of safety concept earlier. Okay. So for example, think of a case before looking at the actual understanding. Okay. Let's think of I need to have $10,000 of sales to cover up all of my fixed expenses. To cover up all of my fixed expenses. So I need to have sales of this amount, 10,000, to cover up all the fixed expenses. Remember, I have not mentioned the target profit. I just have mentioned the fixed expenses. Now, your target sales is to achieve this amount, or you like expect your sales amount is as much bigger, and that is to exceed the $10,000. What do you expect? You know that your break-even sales dollar is 10,000. And the question is, what will be your target sales? You will be satisfied with $10,000 sales, or you like to have less amount of sales dollar, or you like to achieve, or you like to attain more sales dollar? I'm getting the responses. You like to note that I have mentioned 10,000 is your sales dollar. I have not mentioned the 10,000 as fixed cost. Okay. What I'm getting that you want to have a sales of more than 10,000, or you want to have a sales which exceeds the break-even sales. Okay. Now let me ask you, what's the reason that is encouraging you, that is exciting you to take the sales more than 10,000? Why you are not satisfied with the $10,000 sales? Why do you think it is essential always to achieve a sales amount which is greater than the 10,000 break-even sales amount, which is causing you, to make a profit? That is one reason. Okay, what about other reason? Remember, in economics, there is a question that does break-even does break-even sales cover the profit? Okay, so sometimes the fixed expenses includes some administrative profit. Administrative profit, they always try to have this amount of profit. So sometimes that profit is also included in the break-even sales in that case. It is to be noted that how fixed expenses has been calculated. I mean, I need to have this amount of, say, if profit is expressed in terms of manager's salary, the manager's salary is fixed expenses. So in that case, yeah, the profit is included. And if entrepreneur takes a fixed amount from the business, in that case, you can consider it as a fixed expenses. But generally, fixed expenses does not include profit, but there is some ambiguity in that area. But I like to know more reasons from you other than having profit in response to getting sales over $10,000. I like to ask that whether you think that there are some other motivations other than achieving profit. Obviously, it is common that when you exceed the break-even sales, the profit starts. But other than the profit, do you have any other reason? to capture more market share. Good. Any other? Okay, let me give you an idea so that I can get the response from you. Say the two business, they are identical because they do the same business, A, B. And let's assume that they have a same amount of break-even sales dollar, which is $10,000. Same amount of 10 break-even sales dollar, just for simplicity. And the entrepreneur A actually has achieved $30,000 sales, and entrepreneur B has achieved 20,000 sales unit. Sales dollar. Now let me ask you, which entrepreneur will be preferred by you? Both are achieving a profit which exceeds their break-even sales. I mean, because they have achieved sales which is over their break-even sales, obviously they are in a profit of here 20,000, here in a profit of 10,000. So what do you think? Which entrepreneur will be preferred by you, and what's the reason? A would be preferable. Okay, so other than the issue that A is achieving more profit, what might be other reasons that is encouraging you to pick the A? We know all that A is achieving more profit, but other than achieving more profit, what might be other reasons that is exciting you to take the Mr. A? A is safer investment. You are in a right direction. What I was expecting, that you see that if some uncertainties arise in the industry, you see that A is in a more safer position. If the uncertainty arises in the industry in which A and B belong, A will be in a more safer position because he has a sales which is at least 2 times more than the break-even sales, where B sales is only 1 times greater than the break-even sales. So in that sense, A is in a more safer position. Okay. So you see there is a difference, the 20,000 difference, and here 10,000 difference. So what does it indicate? It indicates the margin of safety. Now, before looking at the concept in a more precise way, let me ask you, which individual has a more margin of safety? Individual A has a more margin of safety compared to individual B. Okay, so you can also think of the similar case in your semester CGPA, semester GPA, that when you have a greater GPA which exceeds the average, you have more margin of safety which can help you to make up the loss you might face in coming semester because it is becoming difficult. So with the more margin of safety, you can use it later. Okay, and you can reduce your risk also. Okay. So always we need to have a target to have a higher margin of safety, and you know the reason. Okay. So let's explore it more formally. Okay. So what is it? It is the excess of budgeted or actual sales dollar over the break even sales dollar. So you have a break-even sales dollar, and you have a either budgeted or target sales dollar, or you have actual sales dollar. So the difference between these two, obviously the total sales actual or budgeted will come first, and the break-even sales will come here. And the difference between these two is margin of safety. So you see that when you have a higher margin of safety, you have what is the idea? When you know the margin of safety, you know that how much sales shock you can absorb. You see that when individual A has a actual sales of 30,000, he knows his break-even sales is 10,000. He knows it better that he has a capacity to absorb a sales shock of 20,000 less. I mean, if sales come down by 20,000, he has a capacity to absorb this loss, okay, because he is flying above his break-even sales by 2 times more, okay? And you can think of what would happen in case of individual B. So what does it indicate? It indicates that it prepares you that how much of my sales can drop before I'm going to incur losses, okay? Again, the higher the margin of safety, the lower the risk that you will not be reached into break-even, or you are not going to incur loss. And you know that when you are closer to break-even, your risk is higher always. Okay, you are closer to break-even, your risk is higher. Okay, so either you have to exceed the break-even to a greater amount, or you need to analyze that the actual scenario is like that. I'll not be able to achieve my break-even sales. In that case, you need to stop your business immediately. Okay, if your projection is like that, feasibility study is like that, it will not be possible to have a break-even sales. Okay, and when you are closer to break-even, you do not know what is going to happen, and either in this direction or in this direction. Okay, so but if you are far from the break-even, it is good to make it is easier for you to make the decision. And when you are far above from the break-even, it is more safer position for you because of the margin of safety concept you just have learned. So let's try to apply the concept in case of RBC company, bike company, bicycle. So let's look at RBC and let's determine their margin of safety. Okay. So if we think of that, the RBC has actual sales of 250,000, and we have already learned that their break-even sales is 200,000. So we know that their margin of safety is about, not about, is actually 50,000. Okay. So there are some conventions that can be used for expressing the margin of safety. And when you say that margin of safety is 50,000, it might not be a comparable amount. So what can you do? You can express the number in terms of the sales. You have a sales of actual sales of 250,000. You have a margin of safety of $50,000. And you can easily express that I have a margin of safety of 20% of my sales. Okay, in that case, it is more standardized way of expressing the margin of safety. And again, when you have a sales value in dollar, you can easily express the margin of safety in terms of unit. Can you remember that how much was our selling price? 500. So if it is our selling price is 500, we can easily determine that our budgeted sales, our break-even sales quantity is 500. And here you see that it is equal to how much? 100. Is it 50,000 divided by 500 to 50,000 divided by 500? We are not using this one. We are just trying to help you to know that it is possible to determine the margin of safety or express the margin of safety in terms of the sales unit. So you see, out of the 500 units, you have 100 units of margin of safety. So if your sales drop by 100 units, you can still absorb the shock of sales by for 100 units. So most of the, in most cases, as we do not analyze this, we do not have the idea that how many units of sales can fall in my shop to make me to uh, to convince me or to force me to close the business. Okay, so the answer is in this way we can express that the margin of safety is 100 bikes. Okay, so it is the same thing. If you express the 100 bikes in terms of 500, obviously it will be 20%. So let's check your I have understood the concept of margin of safety, solve the problem of coffee clutch, and try to find out that what is their margin of safety if their average sales is right now 2,100. Find out the number very quick. We have the actual sales. We need to learn the break-even sales. We know how it is possible to get the break-even sales. We have a fixed expense. This one, we need to divide this by the contribution margin ratio. If I'm not wrong, it was 0.758. Have you already solved it? And this is going to be our break-even sales. And yeah, as it has been expressed in terms of cups, we need to find out the sales in terms of quantity. Okay, you can think of that it is 1.49 minus 0.36. I mean the contribution margin, you get the break-even cups, break-even number of cups. Okay, the answer is B. So we'll see that this number, I mean fixed expense of 1,300 over this contribution margin 1.49 minus 0.36. Is it this amount? Yes, no? Yeah. So this should be this amount, 1,105. So what you need to do, we need to divide, we need to subtract this number from the actual sales of 2,100. So this 950 cups is our margin of safety in terms of the sales unit. Okay. Now, next thing we like to highlight the cost structure, which is more interesting thing. Why is this interesting? Because people always face confusion that should I consider, should I take this cost or apply this cost, or should I incur this cost as a variable cost? Incur is a more appropriate word here. Should I incur this cost as a variable cost, or should I incur this cost as a fixed cost? So which one is better for me? So I'm interested to know about a mix of variable and fixed expense, fixed cost. So this concept is also applicable in case of capital structure. If I'm not wrong, you have heard about the capital structure concept in the financial management. However, you have learned that it's a kind of mix of equity and debt, and it shows the cost capital structure. But here you see in the cost structure, we like to know that what is my mix of fixed and variable cost, how much of my total cost is fixed and how much of my total cost is variable. So managers often have some flexibility, often, not always, often have some flexibility in determining that how much portion of my cost will be variable and how much of my portion is fixed. Okay. If I ask you a general question, generally, which cost is preferred by you? You want some cost as always variable, or you want the cost should be always fixed? Which one is preferred by you? I know there is no clear answer, but let me ask you, which one is loved by you, variable or fixed? I will ask you a follow-up question based on your response. Okay, you like the variable cost. Okay. Can you give me a very short answer why you prefer the variable cost over the fixed cost? Let me check your responses because it is easy to calculate. Fixed cost cannot be reduced. Variable cost will be low when sales are low. Cost will be lower when sales is low because it is controllable. Do not have to be beer even when sales equal to 0. Yeah, the good answers are coming. This is interesting, and it is also convincing for me that you have an idea that how variable cost affects you and how fixed cost affects you. So let me ask you some follow-up question. When you are doing good, all things are going well, you like the variable cost or you like the fixed cost? All things are going very well, going very smoothly, and it is at that good level which is beyond your expectation. Say our economy is growing at 7%, our expectation is 6%, you prefer the fixed cost. And if the things do not go well, which one is preferred by you? If the things do not go well, you prefer the variable cost. So you have an idea that which one is to be preferred in which way, but you do not know that whether the time which is forthcoming will be good or the time which is forthcoming will be bad. And there is no way that you will determine the cost structure after you come to learn about the situation. You have to determine your cost structure before you are going to face your situation. So that is the challenging part in managerial decision. Okay. So let's make a summary that what we have learned, that when you have a higher fixed cost, it is good in a good years. In a good years, it is good compared to those companies who have a lower proportion of fixed cost. Remember, it is good in good years. But when you have a high fixed cost, this is not good when the years are bad. Okay. So the general thing is that when companies have a low fixed cost, this is the reason that why you love the variable cost. When companies have a low fixed cost, they have a more stability, they have more flexibility. I mean, they have more flexibility and they can be in a safer position both in good and bad years. Okay. So what can we do? We can apply the learning what we just have learned to see that is it possible that we can determine the operating leverage for a particular level of sales, and we know that how can we use the operating leverage concept for the purpose of expect that what will be changes in the net operating income. Okay. So before going to explore the concept, let me ask you whether you know that when a business has a higher fixed cost, it has higher operating leverage or it has lower operating leverage. when a business has a higher fixed cost, it has higher operating leverage, or it has a lower operating leverage? You probably learned this concept in your fundamentals of finance or principles of finance course. Yeah, you have responded. Good. Yeah. So we like to revisit the operating leverage concept, and here not in a way that you learned earlier, but here our purpose is to check how sensitive our net operating income, which is the definition of profit in our case. You can think of the contribution format income statement. We have defined the profit, this item, net operating income. We have defined this as our profit. And we like to know that how responsive our net operating income is the percentage change in sales. Okay, if my sales has changed by 2%, what will be changes in my net operating income? You can recall that when we change our sales dollar in some cases in earlier slides, we have seen that our net operating income is not changing by the same percentage. There is a difference. So that difference is caused for the cost structure actually. Okay. So it will help us, the operating leverage number will help us that how my sales volume affects my profit, or the profit is equal to this net operating income. In accounting, it is known as EBIT, the EBIT. Okay. So how can you determine the operating leverage? In this case, the contribution margin and the net operating income. Let me help you to recall it, that we get the contribution margin by subtracting variable cost from the sales, either in total or in per unit basis. You see that as you are writing the net operating income, that's why you need to write the contribution margin as a total sales and total variable cost. Okay, it cannot be per unit, as we are, the denominator is a total amount. Okay, so let's check that whether it is possible to determine the operating leverage. Remember, what is this? This indicates the responsiveness of my profit in response to changes in sales. Okay, so it is a kind of reproduction of the contribution format income statement, what we saw earlier. So this amount, and we see that our contribution margin is this amount, 100,000. It is our numerator, and the denominator is our what is our denominator? Our denominator is net operating income. It is our net operating income is our denominator. So if I divide this contribution margin 100,000 by net operating income of 20,000, we have a operating leverage of 5%. Sorry, 5. Here it is actually expressed in terms of 5 times or 5x. What does it indicate? It indicates that if my sales changes by say 1%, my net operating income is going to be changed by 5%. So this is the way how we'll express this number, or how we'll interpret this number. So when we have operating leverage of 5, if I mean our sales go up by 10%, our operating income will go up by 50%. And the opposite thing is true. If my sales go down by 10%, net operating income will come down by 50%. All other things remaining the same. So we can again verify that whether we have did it correctly. Okay. So can you recall that what is our sales here? 50,000. Okay. So if we increase our sales by 10%, what will be our sales? 50,000 will become now 10% more, 75,000. And as our variable expense is this amount, there is a relation Then how much is our variable expense? It comes from the 200, yeah, no, not 200, 300 over 500. So 60% is our variable expense. So out of 275,000, what is the 60%? Can you calculate it? Out of 275,000, what is its 60%? You see the same amount, 165,000, which expresses this percentage. I mean the cost proportion. I mean the cost relative to the sales is remain constant. There has been no changes in the cost relation. Okay. Now you see the fixed expense is the same because we are assuming that 75,000 sales is within the range of 80,000 fixed expenses. So there is no changes. But you see our profit has gone up by 10,000, which is 30,000. You see, there has been increase of 10,000 profit. It is 10,000, but in terms of increase, it is 50% more of this 20,000. So can you recall that we mentioned in the interpretation of degree of operating leverage, if my sales go up by 10% because of DOL is equal to 5, our net operating profit will go up by 50%. So this is the way we can verify what we have solved. Okay. So it is a quick check that you have learned the concept and you see that you are asked to determine the operating leverage. Okay. So you apply your learning and you can determine that your operating leverage in this case is 2.21. Okay. Again, what can you do? You can apply the degree of operating leverage 2.21 to get the answer that if my sales go up by 20%, what will be the response of net operating income in response to changes in the sales? So it should be 20% multiplied by 2.21. So you'll see the 44.2%. So you see that this relation is huge. I mean, without any further calculation, you can determine that if my sales go up by this percentage, what will be the changes in my profit if you have the number of degree of operating leverage. There is one caveat. Remember, okay, this is verification. Okay. What is caveat here? The caveat here is that, yeah, you see, this 5 will remain 5 as long as I have not changed my contribution margin, or I have not changed the relation between contribution margin and the net operating income. Okay, it is not a kind of constant that it will be 5 in all cases. So you have to determine the base on which you have calculated the degree of operating leverage. You see that you have estimated it based on the 500 bytes. Okay, so it depends that whether it will remain 5. It depends on what? It depends on the level of sales, and you see that when the sales level changes, your degree of operating leverage will also change if the relationship among the variables changes. As long as the variable relationships are constant, in that case, it will be applicable. So one interesting thing you like to highlight, can you recall that what was our break-even sales quantity in the current situation? It is the actual sales. Can you recall that what was our break-even sales? I mean, for achieving the fixed expenses, what should be our break-even sales in terms of unit. Break-even sales in terms of unit. Obviously, you know the answer. 900 units, break-even sales. You're probably mentioning it from this one. Yeah, I'm asking for 400. I'm asking for 400, not the changed case. Okay. So what is the interesting fact? Let's try to learn together here. Okay. 400 bikes. So we know the 400 bikes. Okay. Now let's think of if our sales, actual sales, is not 500, say it is one. What would I say? Okay. Say it is 1,500 units or sales unit. In that case, okay, it will take time. So let's think of that it is 1,000 units. So if it is 1,000 unit sales, what will be our sales amount in terms of dollar? In terms of dollar, our sales amount will be, let me remove it. It will be 500,000. And what will be our variable expenses? If the variable expenses is, can you recall that I wrote it, the relation 60%? The variable expense will be 300,000. And my contribution margin is 200,000. And fixed expenses is 80,000. And net operating income is 120,000. So if we determine the degree of operating leverage again, what I would see, the contribution margin is now 200,000 and my net operating income is 120,000. Is it right that what I have written in the changed case and the 1,000 bikes? Is it okay that what I have written here? Okay, so what is the degree of operating leverage here? What is the degree of operating leverage here? 1.67. Okay. So between 5, between 5 and 1.67, which one is greater? 5 is greater or 1.67 times is greater? 5 is obviously greater. Okay. Do you know that what is happening? And I mentioned it earlier, suddenly, that when it will be greater or when you will be in a higher risk. Try to relate that why it has become, why in this case it is greater or why in this case it is lower. Let me check that you have a full concentration that what we are discussing. I recall something that will help you to make this answer. Can you recall that I told something related to break-even? Good. That when sales is closer to break-even level, DOL will be lower. No. When sales is closer to break-even level, DOL will be higher. You see sales break-even is 400, right? Break-even is 400. Break-even in our case is 400. Our sales is closer to break-even in this 500 case or 1000 case. Amirul, can you check that in which case the 500 is closer? So a doll is greater in which case, 500 case or 1000 case? 500 case. So what will be our understanding? Our understanding will be when sales is closer to break-even sales, the doll or the operating leverage or the risk is higher. So I mentioned it conceptually a couple of minutes ago, and this is the proof that how it happens that because of the higher degree of operating leverage, when the degree of operating leverage will become higher. So when there will be, you need to check it every time. It will not remain constant variable, the doll, and you need to find out that in a given sales, and in a given net operating income and contribution margin, what is my doll? And based on that, you can estimate that what is going to be changes in your net operating income in response to changes in the sales. Okay, so you need to be precise. In that case, we have some remaining discussion on structuring sales commission. That is interesting that how can we structure our sales commission. Okay, so probably talked about it, but like to reiterate that companies compensate the salespeople with the sales commission. Now, if the question to you that you are a sales manager, you receive the sales commission. Which one is preferred to you? Fixed sales commission or variable sales commission? If you are a salesperson, you expect that, what is your expectation? Fixed sales commission. Okay. So generally what is done that sales commission is usually made variable, but often what is the practice that sales commission, which portion is variable, that is calculated based on the sales dollar, but that is mistake. The variable sales commission cannot be directly related to sales dollar. It is mistake in a sense that if you do this, you will have a lower profit. Let's look at an example here. A pipeline unlimited product produces two types of surfboard. Are you familiar with the surfboard? I believe that you are familiar. The XR7 and the Turbo. XR7 sells for $100 and it has a contribution margin of $25. And the Turbo surfboard, it sells for $150 and its contribution margin per unit is 18. Now, the sales force at this company are compensated based on the sales commission. Now, the question to you that the salespeople will be interested to sell more XR7 surfboard or the Turbo surfboard? Salespeople will be more interested to sell the XR7 surfboard or Turbo surfboard, given the sales price per unit and the contribution margin per unit, and the sales commission is given in terms of the percentage of sales. I mean the percentage of sales value. What do you think? As a salesperson, what would you expect? You will be wanting to sell XR7 more, or you'll be wanting to sell a turbo more? Turbo more. The clear reason is that turbo is selling at a higher price, and the sales commission, if it is multiplied on this price, it will be a greater amount. So I will get more sales commission if I sell turbo more. So you see that for the company, which one is contributing more margin? XR7 or turbo? Which product is contributing more to the company? The pipeline unlimited. The XR7 is giving more contribution, or the turbo is giving more contribution? XR7 is giving more contribution. So the thing is that there is a problem. The problem is that because we are applying the sales commission based on the sales price, that's why this problem is arising. Rather, if we make the sales commission in terms of the contribution margin of the sales of the product, in that case, it will be good. Okay, so let's see. What we need to do, we need to give the sales commission based on the contribution margin rather than the sales price. Okay. Now we like to finish our discussion just by looking some issues that if a company is a multi-product company, in that case, how can we apply our learning, what we have learned so far in this content? The thing is that you need to know that what is the sales mix. Sales mix. You probably recall that I have mentioned that the number of products Pran AMCL sells is thousands. So it seems difficult to you that how can you find out or apply this? But you will see if you open their annual report, you will see that they have categorized their products into 4 categories. Some juice, some agro, some other categories, some other processed. In this category, they have categorized. So based on their categories, they have a sales mix. So their juice has a 30% contribution in sales. Their agro has a contribution of 40%. Their others have a contribution of 20% in this case. So this sales mix is important to understand when you apply the break-even concept in a multi-product company. It is very hard to find out a company nowadays which has a single product, but it is not it is not the case that this kind of company does not exist. The company does exist, obviously, but it is often true that you get the companies which sell multi-products. Okay. So we know that what is the sales mix? This is the relative proportion of the sales of the company's products. Okay. And you see different products have different selling price, different cost structure, and different contribution margin. So obviously, when these are the case, break-even analysis becomes complicated. And what can we do? And how can we come out from this complex situation? So we can think of the RBC case again, but we are now assuming that RBC has another product other than bike. They have a cart. So there are 2 products. So how can we manage this situation? Okay. So this is the situation you need to understand first, that these are the bicycle, this is about the cart, and this is the total. So their sales of bicycle is $250,000 and their cart sales is $300,000. If you express that out of their total sales, how much is coming from bicycle and how much is coming from cart, the answer will be the 40% of the sales of RBC is coming from bicycle, and 50% of RBC sales is coming from the cart. Okay. So if we see the variable expenses, these are different. In bicycle, we see their variable expenses is 60% of the sales price. So their contribution margin is 40%. And fixed expenses is in total here. And in case of card, the variable expense portion is lower, only 45%. So they have a bigger contribution margin compared to bicycle. But when we are thinking of in total, we see the variable expense is 51.8% of sales. And when we have a variable expense of 51.8% of sales, you have a contribution margin of 48.2% in terms of total. What we are doing here, we are rounding up the contribution margin for products in total amount for getting the break-even analysis. Okay, think of it, that how we have got the contribution margin. You probably can recall that we have applied the contribution. It is actually the contribution margin ratio, right? It is actually the contribution margin ratio 1 minus variable expense ratio. You probably can recall that in break-even sales dollar, we applied the contribution margin ratio. So let's try to use this, the contribution margin ratio. You recall this formula for getting the break-even sales. Okay, fixed expense divided by contribution margin ratio. So fixed expenses, obviously, it is still 80,000. No, it is not 80,000. You see the fixed expenses now, how much? 170,000, not more 80,000. Okay. So when the fixed expense is 170,000 in total for products and the contribution margin ratio is 0.482, what can we do? We get the break-even sales I need to generate, we need to generate for the RBC, get the total break-even for two products together. I mean, in terms of total, they need to achieve this amount of sales to break even. Okay. So you see, if the break-even sales is 352,697, how much of its sales should come from bicycle? How much of its sales should come from card? So the number is, again, the sales mix we used in previous case, you see the 45% and the 55% for bicycle and card respectively. Again, if you apply the 45% of 352,697, you'll see it is 158,714, and 55% of this amount is 193,983. What does it indicate? It indicates that for having break-even sales, the RBC company needs to generate this amount of bicycle sales and this amount of car sales. Okay. So the variable expense relation will be as before. You see the variable expense in this case was 60% of sales. Now we are applying the 60% of this amount as variable expense. This is 95,228. And for the card, again, the variable expense was 45%. So we are applying the 45% of the sales amount as a variable expense. So these are the total contribution margin. Okay, so if we sum up this contribution margin from bicycle and this contribution margin from the card, we get this amount 170,176. But you see our fixed expense was 170,000, and previously our we estimated that our fixed expense of 170,000 needs to be covered by the contribution margin. You see our contribution margin is $176 greater than the fixed expense. So this is kind of confusing, that how break-even sales is giving a contribution margin which is giving a positive net operating income. It should be 0. But why it is giving 176? The answer is that you probably can recall that we have rounded up the two products. So for rounding up, this kind of error is generating. So this is the way how can we apply the learning for the purpose of company which sells multiple products. So this is all about for our today's class.